My name is Rachel. I am 32 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I had a good relationship with my mother. We weren't perfect, what mother and daughter are, but I always tried to be the kind of child who made her proud. I studied hard, graduated with honors, built a stable career in marketing, and even helped her financially when times were rough. For years, I thought she appreciated my efforts. But everything I believed about our relationship crumbled the day she asked me to take responsibility for her massive debt, a debt of $70,000 that I never even knew existed until she dropped it on me like a bomb. It started with a phone call on a rainy Wednesday evening. I was at home, curled up on the couch after a long day at work, when my phone buzzed with her name. I picked up, expecting the usual chatter about her garden or the latest neighborhood gossip. Instead, her voice was heavy, strained. "Rachel, I need your help," she said. "It's urgent." My stomach tightened. She explained that she had accumulated debt over the years: credit cards, medical bills, loans she had taken out to keep the house afloat. I listened in stunned silence as she finally admitted the total: $70,000. At first, I thought I had misheard. "Mom, did you just say 70,000?" I asked, my voice trembling. She confirmed without hesitation, then went on to say that she had already spoken to the bank, and the only way she could avoid losing her house was if I stepped in and took over the payments. She said it so casually, as if asking me to water her plants while she was away. I was speechless. I had my own bills, my own student loans I was still paying off. I had just started saving for a home of my own. $70,000 wasn't pocket change, it was life-changing. "Mom, I can't do that," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. Her tone shifted instantly, from pleading to accusatory. "Can't or won't. Rachel, I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. And now, when I need you most, you're telling me you won't help? Do you know what that makes you? Ungrateful." The word cut me deeper than I expected. Ungrateful. As if the countless times I had already helped her, the bills I paid, the groceries I bought, the emergencies I covered, meant nothing. She twisted the knife further, reminding me of every sacrifice she had made when I was a child, painting a picture of herself as a martyr and me as a selfish daughter. I tried to reason with her, explaining that I didn't have that kind of money, that I couldn't put my own future at risk. But she wouldn't listen. "You make good money, Rachel," she snapped. "You live comfortably. What's the point of your success if you can't use it to help your own mother? I didn't raise you to turn your back on family." Her words haunted me long after I hung up. That night, I barely slept. I sat at my desk, running numbers, imagining what it would mean to take on her debt. Even if I somehow managed to scrape together extra income, it would take me years to pay off. I would be sacrificing my own dreams, my house, my stability, my future family. Was that really fair? The next day, I confided in my close friend, Daniel, someone I trusted with everything. Over coffee, I told him the whole story, my hands shaking as I spoke. He listened quietly, then leaned forward and said firmly, "Rachel, this isn't your responsibility. Your mom made her choices, and now she's trying to guilt you into cleaning up the mess. Don't let her." I wanted to believe him, but the guilt gnawed at me. Every time I thought about saying no, I heard my mother's voice in my head, calling me ungrateful, reminding me of how she sacrificed everything for me. I felt trapped between my love for her and the reality that I couldn't save her without destroying myself. That weekend, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. Her eyes were red, her voice desperate. She brought papers from the bank, spreading them across my kitchen table as if to corner me into saying yes. "Rachel, look at this," she pleaded, pointing at overdue notices and foreclosure warnings. "If you don't help me, I'll lose everything. Do you want that on your conscience?" I stood there, torn apart. My mother's tears, her trembling hands, the guilt she poured into every word, it all pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't lift. But beneath it all, I felt something else rising. Anger. Anger that she had hidden this from me for years. Anger that she thought it was acceptable to demand her daughter pay for her mistakes. Anger that she dared to call me ungrateful when I had given her so much already. I looked her in the eyes and said quietly but firmly, "Mom, I love you, but I will not sacrifice my future because of your choices." She recoiled as if I had slapped her, then shouted, "I can't believe you. After everything I've done for you, you're just going to abandon me?" The argument escalated until she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I sank to the floor, shaking, tears streaming down my face. I knew then that this was only the beginning of a battle that would test not just my finances, but the very foundation of our relationship, and as much as it broke my heart, a quiet thought whispered inside me. Maybe it's time to cut ties for good. The week after my mother stormed out of my apartment was one of the hardest of my life. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened, terrified it would be her again. And when it wasn't her, it was someone else, an aunt, a cousin, even family friends I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly reaching out with concerned voices and pointed words. It didn't take long to realize what had happened. My mother had told everyone, but she didn't tell them the truth. She told them her version. "Rachel refuses to help me," she must have said. "I raised her, gave her everything, and now she's abandoning me when I need her most." The calls came one after another. My Aunt Linda's voice was the harshest. "Rachel, how could you? Your mother gave up everything for you. $70,000 is a lot. Yes, but you have a good job. Isn't family worth more than money?" Her words stung, not just because they were unfair, but because they echoed the guilt already churning inside me. Even my cousin, Melissa, messaged me late one night. "Your mom is devastated. She says you won't even try to help." I can't imagine doing that to my own mother. I sat on my bed, staring at the screen, my hands trembling with anger and shame. My mother had painted me as the villain, and the people who should have known me best accepted her story without question. No one asked about my side. No one wanted to hear the truth that I had already supported her countless times, that this wasn't about one act of help but about a lifetime of carrying her burdens. The worst was when she called me herself, her voice icy with indignation. "I can't believe you're making me beg my own family for sympathy. Do you know how humiliating this is for me? You could make this all go away with one check, Rachel. But no, you'd rather see me lose my house." I closed my eyes, clutching the phone, trying not to explode. "Mom," I said softly but firmly, "I'm not responsible for your debt. You've been hiding this from me for years, and now you expect me to sacrifice my future to save you? That's not fair." Her response was a dagger. "You are the most ungrateful child I've ever met." Then she hung up. For days, I replayed those words in my head. Ungrateful. The label stuck to me like a scarlet letter. Every time I tried to focus on work, her voice echoed in my mind, dragging me down. My performance slipped and my boss noticed. I told him I was dealing with family issues, but I couldn't bring myself to explain the whole truth. How could I? It sounded absurd. Your own mother trying to dump her debt onto you, then branding you ungrateful when you refuse. Daniel, my closest friend, was my only safe space. He listened without judgment, his eyes darkening with anger every time I told him about a new call or guilt trip. "Rachel," he said one evening as we walked through the park, "your mom is manipulating you. She's recruiting everyone she can to pressure you into caving. But you can't let her. If you give in now, it won't stop at 70,000. It will never stop." He was right. Deep down, I knew it. My mother's financial recklessness wasn't new. I remembered the smaller loans she had asked for in the past, the bills she had conveniently forgotten to pay until I stepped in, the emergencies that always seemed to appear when I was finally finding stability. This debt wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, years in the making. Still, the loneliness of standing against her and, by extension, my entire family was suffocating. At a Sunday dinner I reluctantly attended at my Aunt Linda's house, the tension was thick enough to choke me. Every conversation turned into subtle digs. My uncle asked, "So, Rachel, bought that new car yet? Must be nice to have extra money lying around." My cousin chimed in, "I'd give anything to have a stable job like yours. If my mom ever needed help, I wouldn't think twice." I clenched my fists under the table, biting my tongue until I tasted blood. They weren't subtle. They wanted me to feel ashamed, to bend under the weight of their judgment. That night, I cried the entire drive home. Not because I doubted my decision, but because I realized how isolated I was becoming. My family wasn't standing beside me, they were standing against me on her side. And yet, despite the pain, I knew I couldn't surrender. If I gave her what she wanted, it wouldn't just ruin my finances, it would ruin me. A few days later, she tried one last tactic. She showed up outside my workplace. I spotted her from the window, standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, a pitiful expression plastered on her face. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. I walked outside, praying she wouldn't cause a scene. She wasted no time. "Rachel, this is the last time I'll ask. I need you to step up. If you don't, I'll lose everything. I'll be homeless. Do you really want to be the reason your own mother has nowhere to live?" People walking by glanced at us, curious, and I felt my face burn with humiliation. I took a deep breath and said firmly, "Mom, stop. I will not pay off your debt. I've given you so much already, and it was never enough. I am done being your safety net." Her face twisted with anger. "Then you're dead to me." She spat before turning on her heel and walking away. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, tears threatening to fall, but beneath the pain there was something else: relief. Because in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. It was the most painful boundary I had ever set, but it was also the most necessary, and though I didn't realize it yet, cutting ties with her would be the first step toward reclaiming my own life. In the weeks after my mother told me I was dead to her, the silence was deafening. For the first time in my life, I wasn't getting her calls, her texts, her unannounced visits. And yet, that silence wasn't peaceful. It felt heavy, like a storm cloud hanging over me, waiting to burst. I knew she was out there, talking about me, twisting the story into something that painted her as the victim and me as the selfish daughter who had abandoned her. AT work, I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. I would sit at my desk, trying to focus on reports and presentations, but the shame and guilt buzzed at the back of my mind. During lunch breaks, I caught myself staring out the window, wondering if she was okay, if she was paying her bills, if she was telling more lies about me to anyone who would listen. The hardest part was family gatherings. I skipped most of them, knowing exactly what I would face if I showed up. But one weekend, against my better judgment, I went to a cousin's birthday party. The moment I walked in, I felt every pair of eyes on me. Whispers rippled through the room. My aunt, with her sharp tongue, leaned over and said just loud enough for me to hear, "Some kids forget who raised them as soon as they have money." I froze, heat rising to my cheeks, but I didn't respond. What could I say? That my mother had buried herself under $70,000 of debt and wanted me to sacrifice my future for her mistakes? No one would believe me, not when she had already poisoned them with her story. I slipped out early, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses fading behind me. Driving home, I cried so hard I had to pull over on the side of the road. The loneliness was unbearable. I wasn't just losing my mother, I was losing my family, too. They had chosen her side without hesitation, without even asking for mine. But amidst the pain, there were small glimmers of relief. For years, I had lived with constant dread. The dread of another phone call from her asking for money, another emergency that required me to open my wallet, another guilt trip that left me drained. Now, for the first time, I wasn't being pulled into her chaos every day. My bank account wasn't bleeding out from her demands. My evenings were mine, my mornings were quiet, my life was simpler. Daniel noticed the change first. Over dinner one night, he looked at me and said, "You're still hurting, Rachel, but you're also lighter. It's like you can finally breathe." I thought about it and realized he was right. The pain of losing my mother's love, or at least the illusion of it, was excruciating. But the freedom of not being shackled to her endless crises gave me something I hadn't felt in years: control over my own life. Still, the manipulation didn't stop. Even without direct contact, my mother found ways to reach me through others. One evening, I received a message from a family friend, Mr. Harris, a kind older man who had known me since I was a child. "Rachel," he wrote, "your mom is struggling. She told me you won't help her. I don't understand. You've always been such a good daughter. My heart clenched. She was still out there spinning her web, pulling others into her narrative, making me look heartless. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before finally writing back. Mr. Harris, I love my mother, but her debt is not my responsibility. I've helped her countless times, but I cannot sacrifice my future for choices she made. Please understand. His reply was short. I didn't know the whole story. I'm sorry. For once, someone believed me. That small validation felt like a lifeline. There were nights when I doubted myself, when I replayed her words, ungrateful, selfish, heartless, over and over. But then I would look at the plans I had made for myself, the savings account I was finally growing, the small steps I was taking toward my own goals, and I would remember why I had made my choice. If I had given her the 70,000, I would have been drowning alongside her, both of us sinking with no way out. At least now, one of us had a chance to swim. Point one Saturday morning, I drove past her house. I told myself it was just curiosity, but really, it was guilt. The blinds were drawn, the lawn unkempt. It looked tired, just like her. I sat in my car across the street, wondering if she was inside, angry, plotting, or maybe even regretting how far things had gone. But as I sat there, I realized something. It didn't matter. Her choices had led her there. Mine had led me here, that I drove away, without knocking on the door. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the clearest moment I'd had in weeks. I couldn't save her. And I didn't have to. That night, I wrote in my journal, cutting ties hurts, but it hurts less than carrying someone else's burdens forever, and for the first time since the storm began, I fell asleep without tears. As the months passed, I started to notice that my life was slowly shifting into something new, something unfamiliar, but quietly liberating. The heaviness of my mother's constant demands wasn't pressing on my shoulders anymore. For the first time in years, I could focus on myself, on my career, my friendships, and the dreams I had always pushed to the side because of her endless crises. That I poured myself into work, not just to distract my mind, but to finally move forward in ways I had delayed for too long. My efforts paid off. My boss called me into his office one Friday afternoon and praised my performance, hinting at a potential promotion. I left that meeting with tears in my eyes, not from sadness this time, but from the realization that I was capable of thriving when I wasn't being drained by someone else's chaos. With Daniel's encouragement, I also started doing things that felt almost rebellious in their simplicity. I booked a short trip to the coast, just for myself. I walked along the shoreline with the wind in my hair, no phone buzzing with urgent requests, no guilt clawing at my chest. I signed up for a cooking class on Tuesday nights, where I laughed with strangers over burnt pasta and clumsy knife skills. For once, my life wasn't about fixing someone else's mistakes. It was about discovering who I was when I wasn't playing the role of savior, but freedom came with a price. My mother didn't let go easily. She found ways to seep back into my life, sometimes directly, sometimes through others. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail with her handwriting on the envelope. My heart clenched as I opened it. Rachel, it read, I don't understand how you can be so cruel. I gave you life. I gave you everything I had, and now you've abandoned me in my darkest hour. Do you really want to see your own mother on the streets? People are talking, Rachel. Everyone knows how ungrateful you've become. The letter shook me. Her words were knives, sharp and deliberate, aimed to pierce the small confidence I had begun to build. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the paper, tears spilling onto the ink. For a moment, I felt like a child again, desperate for her approval, terrified of her disapproval. But then I remembered something Daniel had said weeks earlier. Her words only have power if you let them. So I folded the letter neatly, placed it in a drawer, and told myself it would stay there as a reminder, not of her accusations, but of the boundary I had drawn and why it mattered. Of course, she didn't stop there. She began reaching out to mutual acquaintances, trying to paint me as a cold, heartless daughter. A neighbor messaged me on Facebook, saying she had heard my mom was close to losing her home, and asking why I wasn't helping. My coworkers, who had known my mom casually through company events, started making awkward comments about how family should stick together. Every time it happened, I wanted to scream the truth, that I had already given more than anyone should, that my mother's choices were not my responsibility. But I learned to stay silent. I didn't know anyone my story. What helped most was leaning on the few people who truly understood. Daniel, of course, but also Jenna, my coworker turned confidant. One evening over drinks, she told me something that stayed with me. Rachel, cutting ties doesn't mean you don't love her. It means you finally love yourself enough to stop being used. Her words pierced through the fog of guilt like sunlight. For so long, I had equated love with sacrifice, as if giving until I was empty was the only way to prove I cared. But real love, healthy love, doesn't demand destruction. There were still nights when loneliness hit me hard. I would scroll through old photos of family holidays, birthdays, moments where my mom and I were smiling, arm in arm. I would wonder if any of it had been real, or if it was always just a performance on her part, a mask that slipped when money got involved. Those memories hurt, but they also reminded me why I had to walk away. Because behind the smiles had always been the quiet expectation that I would carry the weight she refused to face. One Sunday morning, I received a call from Andrew, a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. His voice was hesitant. Rachel, I don't know what's going on between you and your mom, but I heard she's been telling everyone you abandoned her. I just want you to know I don't believe her. I know you. You've always been the responsible one. If you said no, you had your reasons. For the first time in months, I felt seen. His words were like a hand pulling me out of the quicksand. Not everyone believed her lies. Not everyone was against me. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to remind me that I wasn't crazy for protecting myself. As the weeks turned into months, the balance began to shift. The shame didn't vanish completely, but it no longer controlled me. The guilt still surfaced, but I learned how to face it with reason instead of fear. Every paycheck I saved, every decision I made for myself, every new experience I embraced, it all added up to proof that I had chosen the right path. I wasn't just surviving without my mother's approval. I was starting to live. It had been nearly half a year since I last saw my mother face to face. In that time, I had begun to heal in ways I never thought possible. My savings account was growing. I had started running again in the mornings, and I felt like I was finally living for myself rather than constantly trying to patch up someone else's mistakes. But just when I thought the storm had passed, my mother made one last, desperate attempt to pull me back into her world. It was a Saturday morning when I heard the knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened it, my stomach dropped. There she was, my mother, standing on my doorstep with tears already streaming down her face. She looked smaller somehow, thinner, her clothes wrinkled. In her hands, she clutched a stack of papers. Rachel, she sobbed, her voice shaking, I can't do this without you. Please just look at the bills. Please help me. You're all I have. For a long moment, I just stared at her. A part of me wanted to reach out, to hug her, to comfort her the way I used to. But then I remembered the countless times before. The manipulation, the guilt trips, the threats, the way she had turned my entire family against me. I remembered her standing outside my office, spitting the words, "You're dead to me." And suddenly, the tears in her eyes didn't move me the way they once did. Mom, I said quietly, we've already been through this. She dropped the papers on my coffee table and fell to her knees, clutching my hands like a child. Rachel, I'm begging you. $70,000, that's all it is. You make good money. You could pay it off in a few years. Why are you being so cruel? The old Rachel would have crumbled. The old Rachel would have felt the crushing weight of guilt and given in, sacrificing her own dreams to save her mother. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I pulled my hands away gently and stood tall. Mom, this isn't cruelty. This is reality. I am not responsible for your debt. You made choices, and now you have to face them. I will not destroy my future because you refuse to take responsibility for your past. Her face twisted with anger, the tears drying instantly. Ungrateful, she hissed. That's what you are. I should have known. You'll regret this one day. when I'm gone, and you realize you abandoned your own mother." The words stung, but they no longer had the power to pierce me like before. I had heard them too many times, and I finally understood what they were: weapons. Not truth, not love, just weapons meant to control me. I took a deep breath and said the words I had been too afraid to say until now. "I don't owe you my life. I don't owe you my future. And if you keep coming here to threaten me or guilt me, I will have no choice but to cut all contact completely. Do you understand?" She froze, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't believe what I had just said. For the first time in my life, I had spoken to her not as a child begging for approval, but as an adult demanding respect. And in that moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, not sorrow, not anger, but shock. She realized she had lost control. She stood slowly, gathering the papers from the table with trembling hands. "Fine," she said coldly. "If that's how it is, don't come crawling back when you need me." I almost laughed at the irony. When I need her. The truth was, I had been the one she always needed, the one she always drained, the one she always leaned on. And now that I refused to play that role, she had nothing left to hold over me. When the door closed behind her, I felt my knees give way, and I collapsed onto the couch, shaking. Tears spilled down my cheeks, but this time, they weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of release. For the first time in my life, I had looked my mother in the eye and told her no, and meant it. Later that evening, I called Daniel to tell him what happened. He listened quietly, then said, "Rachel, do you realize what you just did? You broke the cycle. She can't use you anymore. That's power, and it belongs to you now." His words sank deep into my chest. For years, I had believed I was powerless against my mother's manipulation, that no matter what I did, I would always be the ungrateful daughter in her eyes. But Daniel was right. I had taken my power back. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I am not ungrateful. I am free." And for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. After that final confrontation with my mother, something inside me shifted. It was as if I had been carrying a heavy backpack full of rocks for years and finally dropped it to the ground. The weight was gone, but my shoulders still ached from carrying it for so long. Healing wasn't instant. It came in waves, some days stronger than others. But for the first time, I believed it was truly possible. The first sign of healing was silence. Real silence. Days went by without angry phone calls, guilt-laden messages, or surprise visits. At first, the quiet unnerved me. I had lived so long in constant defense mode that peace felt foreign. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for her to show up again with more accusations or demands. But she didn't. Slowly, I began to trust that silence could be a gift, not a threat. I threw myself into new routines. Morning runs became my sanctuary. I'd lace up my sneakers just as the sun rose and let the rhythm of my feet on the pavement calm my restless mind. I joined a book club at a local cafe, where I met people who talked about novels and travel and dreams instead of gossip and family drama. One evening, as I laughed with them over coffee and pastries, I realized something profound. I wasn't lonely anymore. I was surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. Daniel and Jenna remained my pillars of support, but I started building new friendships too. There was Maya, a fellow runner with a sharp wit, and Peter, a kind man from the cooking class who always saved me a seat. These connections were small but meaningful. They reminded me that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes, family is the people who choose you, who lift you up without expecting you to sacrifice yourself in return. Work, my confidence blossomed. I took on bigger projects, pitched bold ideas, and was eventually promoted to a senior role. When my boss congratulated me, I thought back to my mother's words about how family should come before everything. And yet here I was, thriving in a life where I had finally put myself first. The irony was almost poetic, but healing wasn't a straight line. There were nights when I scrolled through old photos, birthdays, holidays, moments where my mother and I looked happy together. I would wonder if any of it had been real, or if those smiles had always been overshadowed by the depths she hid and the expectations she carried. On those nights, the guilt crept back in. I would ask myself, was I really ungrateful? Should I have done more? When those thoughts threatened to consume me, I turned to my journal. I filled page after page with truths I couldn't let myself forget. I have given enough. I am allowed to say no. Her debt is not my debt. Writing became a form of therapy, a way to untangle the messy knots of emotion she had left inside me. One particularly hard evening, I went for a long walk and ended up at a small park. There was a bench under a tree, and I sat there watching families with children, couples holding hands, elderly friends chatting on the grass. For a moment, a wave of sadness hit me. I didn't have that kind of bond with my mother, and I probably never would. But then another realization came. Just because I lost that bond with her didn't mean I couldn't build bonds with others. Love wasn't gone from my life. It was just taking a different shape. That night, I dreamed of the future not with fear, but with curiosity. I pictured myself buying my own home, decorating it with colors I loved, hosting dinners with friends who felt like family. For the first time, I didn't imagine my mother at the center of my life. I imagined myself at the center. The turning point came when Maya invited me on a weekend hiking trip. Standing on top of a mountain trail, looking out over a vast stretch of forest and sky, I felt a surge of freedom so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. I wasn't defined by my mother's choices anymore. I wasn't trapped in her narrative of guilt and obligation. I was Rachel, whole, independent, capable of building a life on my own terms. When I returned home from that trip, I found another letter in my mailbox. My mother's handwriting. My hands trembled as I held it, but instead of opening it, I placed it directly into the trash. That simple act, refusing to let her words inside my home, was the purest symbol of how far I had come. I didn't need her approval anymore. I didn't need her love if it came with chains. I was free, and I was stronger than I had ever been. Looking back now, I realize that saying no to my mother was the hardest and most important decision of my life. It wasn't just about $70,000. It was about years of being manipulated, years of being told that love meant sacrifice without limits, years of believing that I was only a good daughter if I gave until there was nothing left of me. Walking away didn't just save my finances, it saved me. It gave me the chance to build a life where my choices were my own, where my worth wasn't measured by how much I could give to someone else, but by how much I valued myself. For the first time in my 32 years, I learned what true freedom feels like. That freedom didn't come without pain. I lost more than just my mother. I lost the illusion that family always means love, that blood always guarantees loyalty. I lost relatives who judged me without hearing my side, who chose to believe the version of me my mother painted instead of the truth. That loss was heavy, but it also made space for something better. In their absence, I built a new circle. Friends who stood by me, who didn't demand more than I could give, who loved me without conditions. People like Daniel, who reminded me that boundaries aren't cruelty, they're protection. People like Jenna and Maya, who showed me that laughter, connection, and support can come from chosen family. And in myself, I found a resilience I didn't know I had. Sometimes, late at night, I still think of my mother. I wonder if she still tells people I abandoned her, if she still spins stories where I am the villain. Maybe she does. Maybe she always will. But the difference now is that her words no longer define me. They can echo all they want, but they bounce off walls I have built strong enough to keep me safe. If there is one lesson my story can offer, it's this: love should not feel like chains. Family should not mean sacrifice without end. And gratitude should never be used as a weapon to control you. It's okay to help, it's okay to support, but it's also okay to say no. Saying no does not make you ungrateful. It makes you strong. It makes you human. It makes you freed. This is my truth. I cut ties with my mother to save myself, and though it hurt, I do not regret it. Because today, I am living a life that is finally mine. Thank you for listening to my story, for walking with me through the pain and the healing. If my journey resonated with you, if you've ever felt the weight of toxic expectations, I hope you remember this: you are not alone, and you are stronger than you know. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear these words. Your support means everything, and together, we can remind each other that even in the face of betrayal and manipulation, freedom and peace are always possible.